You didn't actually go into food writing.
Not remotely.
It wasn't like you woke up and like, I want to.
No. And I not even remotely. And one of the questions I get most asked still now when I think of journalism as dead by students is like, how do I get to be a food writer? And you think, that's really, it's weird. It's such a new question. Why do you want to be? Is it just because you want free food? Because there are other ways to get that. What do you think you have to say about it? The job is to be a writer and then try and segue into something that might be fun to write about. But no. I was a journalist. I did an English degree. I went and worked various, the Telegraph, I did some work experience, the Times, Mail, worked around the place. But I was thought of as someone who knew about food because I lived in Paris after I left university, and I only went with my girlfriend.
I was wondering why you went there. Okay, yeah.
My girlfriend, who was an English girl, also from university. We'd been at university together. She had to do a gap year in France.
Right.
She had to go and live there, teach at the Lycée Saint-Louis. It was a recession when it was in 91, 92, Maastricht era. And I couldn't get a job here, so I just went to Paris, and I ended up working in a shop, Ralph Lauren, in the boutique in the Place La Madeleine.
Nice.
Was paid 20,000 to 200,000 francs a year. Didn't pay tax. 20 grand a year in 1991.
That's huge.
It was 10 years before I caught up with myself in journalism, what I'd earned in this clothes shop, not paying tax, to be fair. And I think the Interpol is still on.
Can you go back to Paris?
No, I'll get arrested at the airport. But and every night I went out to dinner in a different place. And for a little while we lived near the Bastille, where there was a fromagerie, which is not a thing that existed in England then. And I used to go to the fromagerie and eat just buy all sorts of different crazy cheeses. And then I would talk about them, and people, Giles, he knows about cheese, and he knows about food, and he speaks French, and he's eaten in these French restaurants, because that was back when France. So I did know a lot about it, and I would just get asked to write about food because I'd been to France.
What else did you try to write about?
I just was a news reporter, and then I was a features hack.
Yeah,
and then if you really want, and there was the 1994 Condé Nast restaurant guide. It only existed once. A guy I knew was editing it.
No way.
He called up someone at the Times and said, "Do you want to write?" To go, tell you what, Giles Coren knows all about cheese. So I went, okay, and I did I lived in Covent Garden at the time, and I covered WC2 for this guide, and you weren't paid, but you got your expenses. And I enjoyed writing these little nubbits about it. And then, and that was fun. And then a few years later, about 3 or 4 years later, I went to work at Tatler to edit Tatler About Town, which was the review section. It contained the restaurant reviews, which were done by a chap called Rory Ross, who was a lovely man who never filed on time. So I fired him, and then I hired myself. Because people go, how do I get a job as a restaurant critic? Is become an editor, fire the restaurant critic, hire yourself. And it was a cost-cutting measure because I didn't pay myself because I was getting a salary. I was on about 40 grand, something perfectly all right, sort of editing salary. And then I was the Tatler restaurant critic immediately. And then I did all the freebies and got all the free stuff because Tatler, I haven't taken a freebie in 30 years, but except from you. But on the magazines, you take all the freebies, you go out with the PRs, you get drunk, and I ate in every restaurant in London and developed a kind of knowledge of them. And then I got hired to do it for the Independent. But I've always, and then eventually the Times.
Yeah.
But I've always done other writing as well. But it's just gradually you get to know everyone. You get treated amazingly in restaurants.
So much is about relationships too.
Yeah. No, it is.
Yeah.
And also, it's about knowledge. So
and knowledge too.
It's a comparative job.
Yeah.
So what do you actually know? I go and eat in any restaurant. I can compare it to restaurants all over the world that are similar a bit. Is it better or worse than that? 7 out of 10. I mean, I always say that my job essentially is in the end, it's the chicken was a bit salty, the loos were clean, 7 out of 10. And then how many pages can you stretch that over?